This Friday, Jamie Lee Curtis and Lindsay Lohan are back to switch things up in Disney's Freakier Friday.
Totally, yes.
It's an absolute riot,
Woo!
and the only movie that can be described as
So much weirder than the last time.
What last time?
it's the frequel
You ready?
we've been waiting for.
That absolutely slays.
What deeply out-of-touch old person came up with that?
You did.
Wow.
Don't miss the comedy event of the summer for all ages. Disney's Freakier Friday in theaters this Friday. Get tickets now. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested.
It's Wednesday, Addams. I see you're trying to distract yourself from your own banal thoughts. Let me help. Here's a recording thing made of my latest root canal.
Wednesday, Season 2, begins August 6th, only on Netflix.
Hey, listen to this. All I needed was a new starter. Got a great deal on eBay. Did it myself.
Yeah, that's cool. But how about the soft purr of an upgraded exhaust when it fits just right?
For me, it's the little things, like these new windshield wipers from eBay I installed.
From small fixes to big upgrades, eBay has all the parts you need at prices you'll love. Guaranteed to fit every time. eBay. Things people love. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
Pie in the Sky Media. This series contains adult language and descriptions of graphic violence throughout. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome back to Criminal Mischief with Carolyn and Brandon. You're listening to episode 82, Evil Incarnate. Tweed, Ontario is 120 miles away from Ottawa, Canada's capital city. Tweed's a quiet place for year-round residents and a wonderful vacation destination for people who are interested in a quick dip into nature and then back to the big city life. There's a beautiful lake in Tweed on Cozy Cove Lane, but in the fall of 2007, it would become an unlikely epicenter for a slew of weird break-ins. But really, the break-ins were dangerous because of what they represented. Young women's lingerie was being stolen by a predator in the night. This sort of violation is tough, easily dismissed by local law enforcement as a one-off. But it wasn't. And as time wore on, there were dozens of calls to local police over the next 8 months. A pervert was on the loose, breaking into homes where young women and girls lived and stealing their underwear. In the spring of 2008, the same thing started happening about 150 miles away in the community of Orleans, a suburb of Ottawa. Weird burglaries, again, the kind of break-ins where the homeowner feels a different kind of invasion than if someone takes a TV or jewelry. One family would call police reporting that their teenage daughter's entire collection of underwear had been taken, along with very specific photographs from a family vacation where their daughter had been wearing a swimming suit. The police in Orleans immediately took the call very seriously. In fact, they would send a forensic team to the home. Dusting for prints, they swabbed her dresser and discovered semen. Obviously, the intruder had masturbated in the girl's room. This was different from the other underwear raids, and investigators there believed that the Orleans intruder was escalating. And they were right, but not in that community. Back in Tweed, in the early morning hours of September 17th, a young woman was asleep in her home when she was awakened by an intruder. She was blindfolded, stripped, and forced to pose for sexualized, degrading photos. After a couple of hours, he left. The Ontario Provincial Police would respond to the 911 call. But the guy was already in the wind, and they had no leads. Days later, and just blocks away, another woman would make a frantic call to the police, where she would describe a similar sexual assault. She was alone, sleeping when she was awakened, blindfolded, tied up, stripped. She too was forced to pose for photographs before the intruder fled. Police would go door to door around the Cozy Cove Lane waterfront neighborhood where those sexual attacks had taken place, but they came up empty-handed. So, there were these crimes that were reported in Tweed and Orleans, but these were different police jurisdictions, and neither one of them made a connection to each other. In November, about 2 weeks after the sexual assaults had been reported in Tweed, a woman named Anne, who lived about 20 minutes away, in a farmhouse on Highway 37 near the city of Belleville, had noticed that more than 100 sets of her lingerie and a collection of sex toys had been stolen from her bedroom. She called a friend who immediately came over, and together they started going through the home and noticed other things that were out of place, drawers that were open. They weren't sure about calling the police, wondering maybe if someone was playing a prank, and they discussed this as they walked around her house, making sure all the locks on the doors and windows were shut before they left for the night. Anne had decided to stay over at her friend's. She was too freaked out to spend the night at home, alone. However, the next day when she came back, she would find this message typed on her computer screen. "Go ahead and call the police. I want to tell the judge about your really big dildos." Because Anne and her friend had locked all the doors and windows before they left that day, and when they returned, the front door had been unlocked. So they were horrified when they realized that the suspect must have been listening to them talking about calling the police. This was before they left, which meant he'd still been in the house with them. That message left on her computer was the tipping point. Anne called the Belleville police, who would investigate the break-in. Now, at the time, she'd heard about the 2 sexual assaults in Tweed. She knew that the OPP was handling that investigation. And she told the investigator, in her case, that she thought that the person who had targeted her sounded like the same person responsible for the burglaries and sexual assaults in Tweed. But nothing came of it. On November 25th, 2009, in a town called Brighton, which is about 30 minutes from Belleville, 37-year-old Corporal Marie-France Como was found murdered in her home. Marie worked as a flight attendant at the nearby CFB Trenton, which is Canada's largest and most prestigious Air Force base. To homicide detectives, it was clear that her murder had nothing to do with a burglary gone wrong. She'd been found lying on her bed, and it was clear that the killer had spent a lot of time in the home, which meant he had most likely planned the attack, knew that she lived alone, suggesting he was an organized murderer, potentially someone who knew her, or at the very least had been stalking her. Marie's murder devastated her co-workers at CFB Trenton, and a memorial service would be held at the base. Commander Colonel Russell Williams would send a letter with his condolences to her family. Meantime, Marie's ex-boyfriend would be looked at hard by investigators. But not for long. He lived 4.5 hours away from Marie's house, and he voluntarily gave a DNA sample and was eventually cleared, which meant investigators were no closer to finding her killer. On Friday, January 29th, 2010, 27-year-old Jessica Lloyd was a no-show at her job as a school bus coordinator. This was so unlike Jessica that her boss immediately called her mom worried, asking if Jessica was okay. Jessica's family rushed to her place. She lived alone in a house on Highway 37, just outside of the city of Belleville. They discovered that she wasn't home, but her car was in the driveway. Her cell phone, purse, and wallet were inside the house. The family contacted the Belleville police and reported Jessica missing. And right away, law enforcement was on it. A forensic team was sent to process Jessica's home when it was determined that no one had heard from her since she'd last texted a friend around 10:30 Thursday night saying she was going to bed. As investigators were processing inside of Jessica's home, her older brother started looking around outside of her house. and pretty quickly saw a footprint in the backyard. Forensic investigators would capture 3 sets of footprints, one set going toward the house, and 2 others, one of which was smaller, headed toward the field. They believed the smaller set belonged to Jessica. In that field, they would also find tire tracks that were visible in the snow, as if someone had driven off of Highway 37 and onto the field next to Jessica's house. This theory was bolstered after a police officer who had been on duty the night before saw all the activity going on at Jessica's house and realized she might have some really important information, because on Thursday night, she'd driven past Jessica's house on Highway 37 at 9:30 p.m., and she noticed an SUV parked out in that field, which seemed strange to her. So she decided to knock on the door, and when no one answered at Jessica's home, and since there wasn't any evidence of a crime, she just decided to make notes about the SUV. But she didn't write down the make or model of the vehicle or the license plate number. But investigators would get lucky. The type of tire that had left the tread in the snow in the field was called Toyo, which meant only 3 makes of vehicles would match that specific tire: a Toyota 4Runner, a Jeep Cherokee, or a Nissan Pathfinder. In the days following Jessica's disappearance, police went knocking door to door at neighbors' homes along Highway 37, and that's when they spoke to Anne. Remember the woman who had called the police to report a break-in after the perpetrator had written that nasty message on her computer saying, "Go ahead and call the police. I want to tell the judge about your really big dildos." If you'll recall, Anne had told the police then that she believed that whoever had broken into her home and stolen her things could also be responsible for the 2 sexual assaults up in Tweed, which had happened nearly 5 months before. With Jessica's disappearance, the Belleville police would reach out to authorities who were leading the investigation in Tweed, the OPP, and together they also began to re-examine the murder of Corporal Marie Franz Como in nearby Brighton. Were all these crimes connected? A week after Jessica went missing, police were no closer to finding her. They were desperate. So they decided to set up a roadblock on Highway 37 just outside of her home. It was a Hail Mary, but there was some thought behind it. Highway 37 connected Tweed to Belleville and Brighton. Maybe the person who had kidnapped Jessica, if he was connected to these other crimes, was a frequent driver along that roadway. And they did have an ace up their sleeve. They knew that if the person who had parked in the field adjacent to Jessica's place was their suspect, he'd be driving either a Toyota 4Runner, a Jeep Cherokee, or a Nissan Pathfinder. So they were paying particular attention to SUV drivers, which they would pull over. While one officer was chatting with the driver, the other was surreptitiously checking for Toyo tires. And on Thursday, February 4th, officers flagged down a Nissan Pathfinder to pull over. The SUV belonged to the driver, a one Russell Williams, or more precisely, a Colonel Russell Williams. That name might sound familiar. He was the base commander at Trenton. The same colonel who had sent Corporal Marie Franz Como's family a condolence letter after she was murdered. As the one officer chatted with the colonel, asking if he'd seen anything suspicious, the other officer was quietly checking out his tires. And then with a smile and a wave, the colonel was free to go. And so he drove off. But what he didn't know is that he wasn't alone. From that moment on, he was being tailed by an undercover officer. His tires were a match to the tread found out in the field by Jessica's house. For the next 3 days, Colonel Russell Williams' life would be under a microscope by the OPP. As a young man, he'd earned a double major in economics and political science, and after college, he went into the Air Force, becoming a pilot in 1990. A year later, he would marry his wife, Mary Elizabeth, and they would plant roots in the city of Orleans. In 2004, the couple bought a second home in Tweed on Cozy Cove Lane. Tweed was more than 2.5 hours away from Orleans. By 2009, Williams and his wife were living mostly apart. She in Orleans and he in Tweed at the waterfront cottage. They would reconnect in Orleans on the weekend. They didn't have any children and were both workaholics, but Russell had a passion for photography. At the time the Colonel had been pulled over at that roadblock, he was 46 years old, a highly decorated and well-respected pilot with an impeccable record. In fact, in 2005, he was held in such high regard that he was the pilot selected to fly the Queen of England to Canada. He was disciplined, modest, intelligent, and had a reputation for being approachable and friendly, even if he was a little obsessive-compulsive, a bit of a neat freak. But friends would say that was just the offshoot of a very disciplined training. But by Sunday, 3 days after the Colonel had been pulled over at the roadblock, the Ontario Provincial Police were ready. Shout out to Astapro for sponsoring this episode and providing us with free samples. This morning, I literally woke up with a runny, stuffy nose. In fact, it was so bad that my son came in and said, "Hey, Mom." And as I was talking, he was like, "Why is your nose whistling?" If you're a longtime allergy sufferer like me, then you'll know why. The whole one nostril plugged, the other one nearly so, except one little pocket of breathing space that sort of whistles as I breathe. I don't have time for this, and neither do you, which is why I use Astapro, and you should too. Astapro is a first-of-its-kind nasal allergy spray. It is the fastest 24-hour over-the-counter allergy spray. It starts working in 30 minutes, while other allergy sprays take hours. And Astapro is the first and only 24-hour steroid-free allergy spray. And Astapro delivers full prescription strength indoor and outdoor allergy relief from nasal congestion, runny and itchy nose, and sneezing. A combination that's not so fun. I use Astapro whenever my nasal allergies flare up, and I'm always so amazed and grateful at how fast I am back in the game, which is why I trust that Astapro always has my back, and more importantly, my nose. Get fast-acting nasal allergy symptom relief with Astapro. Go to astaproallergy.com for a discount so you can Astapro and go today. That's ASTEPRO allergy.com. Astapro and go. Use as directed for relief of nasal congestion, runny nose, sneezing, and itchy nose due to allergies.
Heather is a nurse practitioner from United Healthcare.
We meet patients wherever they live.
During a house call, she found Jack had an issue.
Jack's blood pressure was dangerously high.
It was 217 over 110.
So they got Jack to the hospital and got him the help he needed.
He had had a stent placed in his heart, preventing a massive heart attack.
If it wasn't for my guardian angel, I wouldn't be here.
Hear more stories like Jack's at unitedhealthcare.com. Benefits, features, and/or devices vary by plan, area, limitation, and exclusions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Mic check. 1, 2. Are we recording? Hi, I'm Michelle Bernstein, an award-winning chef, restaurateur, and mom. I have a lot on my plate, including my psoriatic arthritis symptoms. That's why I was prescribed Cosentyx. It helps me move better.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for people 2 years of age and older with active psoriatic arthritis. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some were fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at 1-844-COSENTYX or Cosentix.com.
Ask your rheumatologist about Cosentix.
They reached out to ask Colonel Russell Williams if he'd come down to the station to answer a few questions. It had been 10 days since Jessica had been reported missing, and Williams agrees. That weekend, he'd been spending time at his new home in Ottawa with his wife. He tells her he'll be home for dinner. The couple had recently moved into a newly remodeled townhome, so the interrogation will take place at the police headquarters in Ottawa. It's just before 3 p.m. when Williams walks into the interrogation room with all of the gravitas of the commanding officer of CFB Trenton. He is the epitome of a casual, self-controlled leader, even in street clothes. Right away, he takes off his bright yellow coat and places it around the back of an office chair. He removes his winter gloves and lays them near the back of the chair before sitting down. There's a table in the utilitarian room. It's pushed up against the white and gray walls. The detective sits down. There's not a lot of space separating the two men. The colonel is wearing jeans and a blue polo shirt with white horizontal lines. His dark brown hair is buzz cut. He's fallen victim to male pattern baldness on top, but appears fit. The detective is wearing a suit, and he lets him know they are being recorded. The colonel's demeanor doesn't change. He faces the investigator, controlled, relaxed, confident. Detective Sergeant Jim Smith of the Ontario Provincial Police asks him if he's ever been interviewed like this by police before. The colonel smiles, chews his gum in a quiet, aw shucks kind of way, says no, saying the closest he's come to an interview with police like this is when he was being tested for his top secret clearance. And there it is, the colonel, trying to assert rank. A nod to his position as the commander of Canada's largest Air Force base, even though he's about to be questioned about the missing person, Jessica Lloyd. You should know that the detective has been prepping for this interview since that roadblock 3 days before. The colonel had never been on their radar before the tire treads. You should also know that this particular detective is a seasoned member of the behavioral science unit of the OPP. He's a trained profiler and polygrapher. He's consulted with a psychiatrist, and together they've dissected everything about this man sitting in front of him now. The detective is mild-mannered and polite as he tells the colonel that he likes to treat people with respect and expects that in kind. There's no bluster or attitude or judgment. But from the beginning, the detective will establish a pecking order. He is respectful of the colonel, in tone of voice, in body language, and word choice, but he will call him Russell, not Colonel. An important distinction. He doesn't want to give him that deference, that power and respect. Pretty quickly, the detective lets him know that this isn't an interview just about Jessica Lloyd.
Because essentially, there was a connection between you and all four of those cases. Would you agree? Geographically,
and then I guess I drive past. Yes, I would have to say there's a connection. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where was Williams the day that Jessica Lloyd was reported missing?
Friday on the day I was at home most of the time. Most of the day I had a sort of a stomach flu.
Okay. In Ottawa or Tweed?
Tweed.
Then he asks about the murder of Corporal Marie Franz Como.
The day that Marie Franz Como.
Yeah.
Do you remember how you found out?
I do. Yeah, I was sent an email. Well, as soon as the ops staff and the base learned, they told me.
Okay.
I can't remember what day of the week we're talking about, but yeah. No, I mean, obviously when your people gets killed, it gets your attention. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm very mature about that kind of.
And how did you know Marie?
I'd only met her once. She was on a crew I was on just after I got to the base.
Okay.
Even though Williams is extremely intelligent, competent, he seemingly has no idea that he's about to step into a trap.
What would you be willing to give me today to help me move past you in this investigation?
What do you need?
Well, would you be willing to supply things like fingerprints, blood samples,
Sure.
things like that?
Yeah.
Okay. Footwear impressions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I assume you're going to be discreet?
It's possible, yeah.
Because, this would have a very significant impact on the base if they thought you thought I did this.
The next question, is there any reason that you would be connected to the women who were sexually assaulted in Tweed, or to Jessica, who was still missing, or to Marie, who'd worked under Williams?
Is there any contact that you may have had with any of those 4 women that you may not want your wife to be aware of? Anything like that that we should know about to try and explain why, if your DNA is found, it would help us understand why it may be there?
Absolutely not.
Visited Marie France Como at her residence?
No.
Okay. All right. So you're quite positive there would be no reason why your DNA would be in any of those 3 locations? Okay. Did you know Jessica Lloyd, even in passing, for any reason?
No, I didn't hear her name till it was on the news.
Okay.
Up until this point, these questions are pretty standard for anyone with even a cursory knowledge of police interrogations. Williams has just said there should be no reason why his DNA would be on the victims or at their homes. It's important to note that Williams has no idea about the tire treads from his SUV, the ones that match the tread in the field next to Jessica Lloyd's home.
What kind of tires do you have on your Pathfinder?
I think they're Toyo.
Yeah.
I don't know the model.
Okay. I'll read this off to you, see if it rings a bell. Ever heard of, does Toyo Open Country HTS make any sense? Okay.
This is the first indication to Williams that they have something on him. The detective tells him that his tire pattern matches the one that was in the field. And he asks him a real simple question. Has he ever driven his SUV in that field? And Williams says no. He then shows the boot prints that had been found behind the house that matched the tread on the boots he'd worn into that interrogation room. This is a significant turning point in the interrogation because the detective's demeanor has been the proverbial good cop, soft-spoken, doesn't press, just asking questions, but it's about to get real, really quickly, as this goes from fact-finding to a tightening of that noose that up until this moment, Williams didn't even realize was around his neck.
Talked about the whole idea of how we've approached you here, okay? The trying to be as discreet as possible. Mm-hmm. The problem is, Russell, is every time I walk out of this room, there's another issue that comes up, okay? And it's not issues that point away from you, it's issues that point at you, okay? Your vehicle drove up the side of Jessica Lloyd's house. Your boots walked to the back of Jessica Lloyd's house on the evening of the 28th and 29th of January. Okay, you want discretion. We need to have some honesty, okay? Because this is getting out of control really fast, Russell. Okay, really, really fast. This is getting beyond my control, all right? I came in here a few hours ago, and I called you the way I called you today because I wanted to give you the benefit of the doubt. But you and I both know you were at Jessica Lloyd's house, and I need to know why. You and I both know that the unknown offender on Marie France Como's body is going to be matched to you, quite possibly before the evening's over. Your opportunity to take some control here and to have some explanation that anybody is going to believe is quickly expiring.
The detective tells him that, as they're talking, his home in Tweed was being searched, as was his newly renovated townhouse in Ottawa. Williams knows that they'll find more than 600 pairs of stolen women's underwear, and much, much worse.
It's hard to believe this is happening.
Why is that? Why is it hard to believe?
It's just hard to believe. My only two immediate concerns from a perception perspective are what my wife must be going through right now.
Yeah.
and the impact this is going to have on the Canadian forces.
Russ, what are you looking for?
I'm concerned that they're tearing apart my wife's brand new house.
So am I. Nobody tells them what's there and what's not. They don't have any choice.
I want to minimize the impact on my wife.
So do I.
So how do we do that?
Well, we start by telling the truth.
Okay.
Okay. So where is she?
Get a map.
Get a map. After nearly 5 hours of interrogation, Williams finally confesses. Something he will do for hours. Telling the detective where his hiding spots are, memory sticks containing thousands of time and date-stamped photographs, images he'd taken of himself wearing the stolen lingerie. He'd set up a tripod so he could capture video of himself as he raped and murdered Marie and Jessica. He went on to tell the detective that his double life had begun in September of 2007 in Tweed, when he started breaking into homes, going through unlocked windows and doors, stealing women's underwear and bras, taking them back home, setting up his tripod, and taking photos of himself wearing the lingerie. In the spring of 2008, he branched out, breaking into homes near his Orleans neighborhood. He was the one who had left his semen behind in a teenage girl's bedroom. It was the start of him becoming more brazen. In July of 2009, he'd been promoted to base commander at Trenton, all the while living this depraved double life. And later, that fall, he would commit his first sexual assault near his Tweed home. A week later, the second sexual assault on a woman who lived 3 doors down from his waterfront cottage. 2 weeks later, he would break into Anne's farmhouse on Highway 37, stealing her lingerie, sex toys, and leaving that horrible message on her computer. 1 week after that, he murdered Corporal Marie-France Como. He admitted that he had targeted Jessica. She'd been running on her treadmill when he passed by her home. Then, on Thursday, as he drove by, he saw that her car wasn't in front of her house. So he broke in, looked around, made sure that she lived alone, and then left again, parking in the adjacent field, waiting for her to return that night. After she went to bed, he woke her up and began to rape and torture her inside her house. Then he made her walk with him to his SUV that he'd parked in the field. He promised not to kill her if she did exactly what he said. He taped her eyes shut and then drove her back to his cottage in Tweed, where he continued to sexually assault and beat her. The next morning, Jessica believed they were leaving. When her back was turned, he hit her on the head with a flashlight, then strangled her with a rope and left her body in his garage. He left her there and drove to work, spent the weekend in Ottawa with his wife at their new home, eventually returning to the cottage on Tuesday, where he took her to the spot they would later recover her.
Well, so I raped her in her house, and then I took her to the car and took her to Tweed, and spent the day in Tweed. And then I hit her as we were walking. She thought we were leaving. Hit her on the back of the head.
He would explain what happened to Corporal Marie-France Como, that she'd been under his command at CFB Trenton and caught his attention when they'd flown together once. As base commander, he had access to her personnel file. He knew when she'd be out of town flying, where she lived. So he went to her place, crawled through a basement window, made sure that she lived alone, and came back again, and hid in her basement. When she saw him, he would hit her with a flashlight, tie her, and carry her upstairs to her bedroom, where he raped her and took pictures as he did so. Even though his head and face were covered, and she couldn't see who he was, he would murder her anyway, videotaping her final moments.
I subdued her, tied her up, brought her upstairs, and strangled her later in the morning. Well, or suffocated her. Right. Some tape. Left her there.
Well, let me ask you this. Did you like or dislike these women?
I didn't know any of them.
Okay.
I had met Marie-France that one time in her airplane.
Okay. Let's talk about Jessica, because she was there with you for the whole day, right? What kind of feelings were you experiencing while you were with her that day?
Oh, she was a very nice girl.
Do you know why you killed her?
Well, I think I killed her because I knew that her story would be recognized because she knew I was taking pictures.
Mm-hmm.
So because of the two stories in Tweed, it's been quite obvious.
So if you didn't take pictures, what would you have done with her?
I don't know.
In the early morning hours, after Williams' confession, he would take investigators to the place where he dumped Jessica Lloyd's body off a remote road near Tweed. At first, he was charged with 2 murders and 2 sexual assaults. But later, there would be more charges to come. 82 break-ins in Tweed, Belleville, and Orleans. And he would plead guilty to all charges against him. During a 4-day hearing, evidence would be presented. All those pictures of him dressed in the lingerie that he had stolen from his victims. The last pleading words that he'd recorded from Marie Franz Como, saying, "Have a heart. I want to live." And Jessica Lloyd, "If I die, will you make sure my mom knows I love her?" In a country with no death penalty, he would be given 2 life sentences to be served concurrently. So 25 years before the possibility of parole. After Russell Williams was sentenced, the Canadian Forces would rescind his commission and burn his uniform. And even though he would confess, he would never show remorse or answer the question, why?
Why do you think these things happen? Have you spent much time thinking about that?
About why?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know the answers. And I'm pretty sure the answers don't matter.
Up next, Criminal Mischief with Carolyn and Brandon, bonus content. We'll discuss some details of this case you won't want to miss. And if you have a minute, head over to Apple Podcasts to rate and review the show, or share it with a friend. We'd really appreciate it. And as always, thanks for listening. From Cloud 10, Criminal Mischief is a pie-in-the-sky production, recorded in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. We're produced by Brandon Morgan and myself, music by Soundstripe. I'm Carolyn Osorio, your writer and host.